What's going on, guys? Billy here, and DJI's intelligent flight modes have evolved quite a bit over the past couple of years through the software that's found in their newest drones. Now, you could make the argument that in their older offerings like the Phantom 4 Pro and the Mavic 2 Pro, they actually had a larger list of these flight modes to choose from. In fact, that is the topic of the most viewed video here on my channel. I think that it's sitting at like 850,000 views, and that was before I even showed my face in my videos. Man, that was a long time ago. So that list that I just shared with you on the screen there was from the intelligent flight mode selection on the Phantom 4 Pro. I think it was pretty much exactly the same on the Mavic 2 Pro, but regardless, there was a lot of different options to choose from. Whereas in this new drone right here, the Air 2S, we've only got 3 different flight modes to choose from, and they are ActiveTrack, Spotlight, and Point of Interest. Now, before we go any further, I just want to mention that I teamed up with Moment and dropped a lesson over on their shop about everything that you need to know about the DJI Air 2S. So if you want to learn how to set the drone up, if you want to learn some best flight practices, if you want to learn how to take better photos and videos, or if you want to learn more about these intelligent flight modes, go ahead and check that lesson out over on their page. I'm going to put a link down in the description. It'd mean a lot to you guys if you went and at least checked it out, because I think it's the biggest video project I think that I've ever worked on. So I just figured I'd mention that, but now let's get into the intelligent flight modes available here on the Air 2S. So to get things started here, the best way that I could summarize each of these flight modes is up here on the screen. ActiveTrack literally does everything for you, from camera and gimbal movements to changing the drone's position and flight path. Spotlight, on the other hand, takes the automated flight out of the equation, but keeps the camera locked on the subject at all times. It will, however, spin the drone to keep the subject in frame, which we'll touch on a little bit more in depth here shortly. Finally, the point of interest flight mode is pretty self-explanatory. It flies a circle around a point of interest, which is probably one of the most popular types of drone shots that you can capture. Now, in those older DJI drones that were run by the DJI Go application, the way that you'd access the intelligent flight mode menu was from a small little remote icon that was kind of pushed over to the side of the screen. In the Air 2S though, we have 3 different flight modes that are always on, or I guess a better way of saying it is that they are always ready to be activated from this main flight screen. All you have to do is draw a box around your subject, and then that brings up those 3 different flight modes to choose from, which of course, working from left to right, we have ActiveTrack, and then Spotlight, and finally Point of Interest. So let's start with the first intelligent flight mode. It's the one that I'm sure most people are interested in, and it is ActiveTrack. Now, we do have an upgraded version of the ActiveTrack software here found in the Air 2S. It's upgraded over what was in the original Mavic Air 2 that shares the same body style, and the reason for this upgrade is solely because of the 2 top sensors here found on the Air 2S. We've looked at these sensors previously in almost all of the videos that I've uploaded here to my channel regarding the Air 2S, but just to reiterate, not only do these sensors look upwards, they're also slanted ever so slightly to look forwards as the drone is pitched forwards. This allows the drone to better scan obstacles in front of it, which of course results in a more refined autonomous flight experience as the drone can see more obstacles. So from the main flight screen here, once the subject has been selected and the green box highlights that subject, then the rest is kind of up to the drone. You'll see that after you make the selection, the Air 2S will immediately make some slight changes, and then as the subject starts to move, so will the drone. Now during the flight, you can change the aircraft's position like you normally would with the sticks, so we can change the distance as well as the height. Now right now we are in the trace ActiveTrack shooting mode, so the drone will make its best effort to always stay behind the subject. If instead you want to follow from the side or even from the front, then you'll want to make sure that you select the parallel ActiveTrack shooting mode. This way, as soon as you select your subject, you can immediately change the drone's position to say the side or the front of the subject as I mentioned. This is a little bit more dynamic and overall gives you more control. Overall, I'm really impressed with this drone's ability to dodge obstacles and alter its course as it follows the selected subject. Those sensors that they added on the front make me feel more confident in this drone's ability to scan the area and detect obstacles more efficiently, but just be careful when using that parallel flight mode within ActiveTrack, because the drone isn't always going to be flying forwards. It could be flying sideways where there are no sensors to help detect obstacles. Oh yeah, and one more cool thing to note, the Air 2S knows what it's tracking, so if you select a person, it will show an icon of a person at the bottom of the green box. On the other hand, if you say choose to track a car, it will show a vehicle icon instead. This doesn't just work as a means of letting you know obviously what you are tracking, but it actually alters the flight characteristics of the Air 2S. When tracking a human, for example, it'll fly lower to the ground and closer to the subject, but on the other hand, when tracking a car, it flies a bit higher off of the ground and further from the subject to compensate for its faster speed. So don't get me wrong, ActiveTrack is a great flight mode. I mean, what's better than letting the drone do all of the hard work and thinking for you? Well, for me, having manual control is better, and that's why I prefer to use the Spotlight intelligent flight mode, because it's this perfect blend and perfect hybrid between an autonomous flight mode and my own control on the sticks, my own manual flight, so that I can position the drone how I like. So as soon as you select the subject that you want to trace, Spotlight will immediately be enabled by default. The green box highlights the subject like we're used to with ActiveTrack, but as the subject moves, the drone stays put. It doesn't fly on its own. Remember though, this is a hybrid flight mode that mixes autonomous and manual flight characteristics. The drone, for example, will yaw or rotate and will change the pitch of the gimbal to keep the subject in frame. The rest is up to me or you when flying, so all that's left to really worry about is our height and the drone's position. This makes it really easy, so you don't have to worry about all these different movements like the gimbal and rotation of the drone. You just kind of have to fly in the direction that you want, and the shot ends up looking great. Now, this Spotlight shooting mode is really versatile because you aren't trapped into just following a moving subject, whether it be a person, a car, a jet ski, or a boat. You can train the camera on just about anything, and that camera will lock in on the subject as you fly the drone around. For example, I shoot a lot of real estate, so homes and buildings, and Spotlight is a huge help because I can just select the structure and move the drone around. It really takes a lot of the thinking out of the equation. This helps with reveals, orbits, slow rising shots, approach shots, you name it. As long as the house is in the frame, the drone will do a lot of the hard work to help you get that nice, smooth shot. Even if the drone loses the subject, regardless of what it is, whether it's a person, a car, a house, a landscape element, it will still face in that general direction to help you frame the shot through yaw and gimbal movements. Much like all of the other flight modes, I tried my hardest to shake the building that I was tracking, and I did it a couple of times on a couple of different buildings, and over the course of using Spotlight, it's done a really good job at making sure my camera is trained on the subject that I selected. Now, before we move on, I quickly want to share this clip with you of my drone hovering up at around 275 feet in the air, and I just want to point out at how accurate it is at tracking my car, in this case, moving up and down through the parking lot. Even from this distance and this height, it's able to perfectly track my car up and back through this Spotlight shooting mode. And remember, my car is the color black and it's on top of black asphalt, and even though the colors are just a little bit different, it isn't the perfect level of contrast like white on black that a camera would excel at. So this is a fairly tough situation for the camera to track the subject, and it nailed it. Now, I'm not trying to make a case just for Spotlight here, but instead I'm trying to refer to this entire intelligent flight mode system that DJI has made through ActiveTrack, Spotlight, and Point of Interest. The camera does such a good job at understanding what it needs to track, and it's able to lock in on that subject. Even when I was using ActiveTrack previously in the video, you saw it lost my car, but then it picked it up right away. And again, it was a black car on black asphalt, but it knew what it was supposed to be tracking. It really is impressive. Okay, so we have really gotten through the meat and potatoes of this video, because I would say that those first two flight modes, being ActiveTrack and Spotlight, are going to be the ones that most people rely on, but I just want to make it clear as we move into our third flight mode here, the third section of the video, that ActiveTrack and Spotlight definitely have their own different use cases. It's not like I would always use Spotlight every single time over ActiveTrack. So for example, when I was on my boosted board, the last thing I want to worry about is the position of the drone. I want the drone to do all of the work for me because I'm focusing on not falling, and I've got another remote in my hand. So I want to put that remote for the drone down by my side and just ride and have the drone do all the work for me. So ActiveTrack is great in that scenario. But if you are, say, following somebody else on their boosted board, or if you're following somebody else's car, I wouldn't leave it up to ActiveTrack to follow them. Instead, I'd take that manual control with Spotlight and allow the drone to kind of train the camera on the subject, but then I'd provide the flight input. So again, two very different flight modes, but most of the time I lean towards Spotlight as long as I'm not the one that I have to follow. So getting into POI, or point of interest here, it starts just like all the other intelligent flight modes by drawing a box around your subject. Once you've made your selection, all that's left to do is choose the direction of the drone's rotation and the speed that it travels. So by sliding these arrows, it's going to give you control over how the drone is going to orbit the subject. Once you've made your selection, you can move the drone forwards and backwards to go closer and further from the subject, and it will make the necessary corrections to keep spinning in a circle around what it is that you're tracking. Now, you might have noticed that the drone came to a very slow start when activating the point of interest flight mode, despite me wanting it to go as fast as it possibly could. Now, it obviously did pick up speed, but just know that when you initially start that POI flight mode, it's going to take a little bit of time before it catches up to that full speed. I'm not exactly sure why it does this. Maybe it's so that you can first set up your position with the drone, but regardless, I just figured I'd mention that. You know, throughout this video, I've really been talking up ActiveTrack and Spotlight and showing off all of the different software improvements that they've brought here with the Air 2S. I mean, it's really cool to see the drone lose the subject around the tree and then re-pick up the subject and follow it. I mean, it really has come a long way, but point of interest is also a flight mode that has come a long way as well. I mean, I remember in the original Phantom 4 Pro, the way that point of interest worked is you had to fly to the subject you wanted to orbit. You'd basically point the camera down to line yourself up. You'd set a waypoint, and then you'd fly backwards to the distance that you'd want to fly, and then it would orbit that area. So it was a really cumbersome process. It definitely took a lot longer than what we have now in the Air 2S, being able to sit there, mark the place or mark the position you want to orbit around, and then let the drone do all the work. And it really does do a good job. So again, I'm really impressed with all the improvements made throughout all of these intelligent flight modes. Now, before we wrap this video up, I quickly just want to mention one last feature that's useful no matter which of these flight modes that you're using, point of interest, ActiveTrack, or Spotlight. It's called subject scanning and can be turned on from the control section of the DJI Fly application settings menu. And when this is turned on, you can tell because first of all, you can see all of these green crosses, but also in the top right corner, there's a little radar icon. So from this, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's going to be able to scan the area for any subjects that you might want to track. Again, whether it's with point of interest, Spotlight, or ActiveTrack. So all you need to do is tap on the plus icon and it will select that subject. All right, so that pretty much wraps up the tutorial portion of this video, but I have to end this video on a rant. Now look, DJI has done a great job with the intelligent flight modes that are built into the Air 2S. They've made strides over the past couple of years. It's been very clear that they're focusing on these 3 flight modes to get better as time goes on, because with each new drone, we get like ActiveTrack 2.0, 3.0, 4.0, right? The software is always getting better, and that's because of software improvements, but also because of extra hardware added on. But I might have made my gripe pretty prevalent in the beginning of this video with showing you guys the intelligent flight mode list on some of the older drones like the Phantom 4 Pro and the Mavic 2 Pro. All of those were just axed, right? I mean, just reading here, what happened to course lock, draw, home lock, terrain follow? I remember one of the intelligent flight modes that I used to use a lot, I think was called Follow Me. So it wasn't like ActiveTrack where it used a camera-based algorithm to follow the subject, but instead it used the position of your remote controller and your phone. So really, you couldn't do anything to shake the drone. Even if you outran it and you were, say, driving at 60 miles an hour, the drone would putter along until it caught up with you. So even if you're driving under trees or you're on a boat, you couldn't shake the drone even if you tried. So that's something I'd love to see implemented into this drone. But who am I kidding? I would love to see all of those old intelligent flight modes make their way back into the DJI Fly app for a drone like the Air 2S, because even though they might seem old, they might seem outdated, they still had a use. I enjoy that DJI is focusing on 3 flight modes and they're making them as good as they can. And again, it's prevalent because they do a really good job at what they're supposed to do, but there really isn't this huge selection. I mean, aside from these intelligent flight modes, we've got like A-Pass, right, which will automatically dodge obstacles as you fly around. We've also got like master shots and quick shots, but at the end of the day, I want a big list of intelligent flight modes that makes this drone unique over any other drone. That's something that always made DJI's drone stand out, were all these flight modes, and now we only have 3. So look, they're great. I hope that if you have the Air 2S, you learned how to use them in this video, but DJI, I hope you guys come out with some more flight modes in the future because they were a lot of fun to use. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of the flight modes down in the comment section below. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.